Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you from Brussels. I would like to thank all those who are watching us live at home, on M1, on Here TV, and on Facebook. The second day of the NATO foreign ministers' meeting has come to an end. We had a chance to listen to the European Union's foreign representative and to hear how Europe and the EU would like to improve its defense capabilities. There is no debate on this issue. This is good news. There is no debate on this issue. In fact, there is full agreement on the need to improve Europe's defense capabilities. We Hungarians are in a particularly good position, as we are now in the third consecutive year in which we have spent more than 2% of our GDP on defense. In fact, we are also in the third consecutive year in which we have spent more than 20% of our GDP on defense. In the third consecutive year, Hungary produces more than 40% of its GDP. In the current year, 45% of our defense spending is spent on acquiring new equipment and modernization. This is the third highest GDP in the NATO. Why am I telling you these statistics? Because everyone does not take this for granted. The EU has 32 NATO allies, and less than 2/3 of them can spend more than 2% of their GDP on defense. There are some who do not even account for 2% of their GDP. Just 2% of their GDP is spent on defense. There is one country that does not have an army, so this is not relevant. The other country shows that we are among the 20 countries that can spend more than 2% of their GDP on defense. So, there is still a lot of work to be done if we consider the development of European defense capabilities as an important goal, and we are already doing so. It is true that there are many issues that need to be discussed in the future, but these are issues that can be discussed. However, there is a strategic issue that needs to be clarified. A large part of the countries in the EU consider the armament of the EU to be in the context of the current war. So the EU's strategy to increase its defense capabilities is part of its strategy to extend the war. This is not acceptable to us, just as we do not accept that Europe's defense means the defense of Ukraine. Europe's defense means the defense of Europe. The growth of the European Union's defense capabilities means the growth of the European Union's defense capabilities, and not the interference in the defense capabilities of a non-NATO and non-EU country. So what is the basic situation? The basic situation is that Ukraine is defending itself. It is not defending Europe, but itself. Because Ukraine is under attack, Ukraine is at war. There is not a single EU member state or a single NATO member state under attack, and not a single EU member state is at war. So we, Europe, the European Union, EU member states do not need to be defended by anyone. So the assumption that Ukraine is defending Europe is simply not true. So to assume that Ukraine is the first European defense line is simply a false assumption. Ukraine is defending itself. Ukraine is doing this heroically, and this is why it is being praised. But this does not justify the fact that we are trying to see Ukraine's defense as Europe's defense. This is why the strategy of strengthening European defense does not mean the supply of weapons to Ukraine and the increase of financial support. So we do not accept this. We refuse to see the strengthening of European defense as a kind of embezzlement in order to hide the money of European taxpayers for the supply of weapons to Ukraine or for the supply of 10 billion euros to Ukraine. This is not the main reason, but one of the main reasons is that these decisions lengthen the war. So, once again, the strengthening of European defense does not justify the fact that Ukraine's supply of weapons and money is being hidden. Another thing I would like to say about this is that European defense can only be developed effectively if we create peace in the meantime. Let's think about it. They are talking about 800 billion euros here. This is a huge amount. 800 billion euros will have to be paid out somehow. And of course, there is a lot of fuss about credit, record, and so on. But you also have to pay back the credit, so you have to pay this out of something. It is clear that this cannot be solved with the current economic performance of Europe. European economic performance can only improve if there is peace. Because the natural environment for economic development, economic growth is peace and not war. Therefore, the effective development of European defense capabilities also requires peace. And in order for there to be peace, it would be very simple for European countries. It would be very simple because after 3 years of total chaos, someone has finally come, a new American president, who should only support us. The European Union should do nothing else but retreat and support Donald Trump in terms of peaceful efforts. Compared to this, there is a lot of hysteria and opposition. So the European Union cannot get out of such a hysterical loophole, and now there is a huge opportunity for this. And finally, I would like to say here that it is frightening and alarming that some NATO member states, some EU member states, are constantly saying that the agreements are coming out of mechanisms that are bound to the importation of nuclear weapons. After Lithuania announced its withdrawal from the agreement on the banning of cassette weapons, 3 Baltic states, Poland and Finland, announced that they are withdrawing from the agreement on the banning of ballistic missiles. And this is very, very alarming and frightening. We believe that such low-level destructive weapons should be restricted in the future as well. That's all from NATO. Of course, if you have any questions, I am happy to answer. Thank you very much. I would just like to quickly inform you that today I had a chat with a colleague of the Foreign Minister of Ukraine after the meeting. The situation is as follows. I can tell you about 2 positive news. We have established that they are not obstructing the appointment of our consulate in Péter, and we are starting the process of the appointment of their consulate in Nyíregyháza. I said Péter, didn't I? Yes, so the appointment of the consulate in Péter and the consulate in Nyíregyháza will be temporarily allowed to each other. And after many years of work, a new border will be opened next week between the 2 countries, between Nagyhord and Nagypalad. I think these are good news. Of course, on our agenda, the issues of the Carpathian Hungarian national community were mentioned. The Hungarian position is clear. Brussels wants to force Ukraine into the European Union quickly. This comes with many risks, many serious risks. Now they want to start the negotiations in order to open the first group of negotiations. This would create a new situation in terms of quality, and would put the negotiations in a completely new dimension. This is why now is the best time for the Hungarian people to express their opinion on whether they want Ukraine to join the European Union or not. So the Hungarian people will receive the ballot papers in April and May, in which they can express their opinion. But in addition to many serious risks, the situation of the Carpathian Hungarians is also important. The rights of the Carpathian Hungarians were systematically taken away from them since 2015. They took away a significant part of the rights to education, to mother tongue education, to culture, to mother tongue public administration, and this is unacceptable. Our position is clear and simple. The rights that were in force until 2015 should be returned to the Hungarians. It is not complicated. The rights have been taken away, they should be returned. We do not ask for anything more. However, we see that the Ukrainian parliament has two new legislative proposals. One of them, in my opinion, is terrible. It is about banning the use of Hungarian language in private conversations between students, in private conversations, and in the conversations between teachers of Hungarian nationality. In other words, this law would practically prohibit the use of Hungarian language outside of class. This law would prohibit it. Let's think about it. The Hungarian boys are playing football in the courtyard, and they should be talking to each other in Ukrainian. The teachers should only talk to each other in Ukrainian. What kind of situation is this? Of course, my Ukrainian colleague said that this should not be dealt with because it is an opposition petition, but it is still only in the Ukrainian parliament's agenda. And if there is an agenda, it should be discussed, and we do not want it to be a problem. There is also a legislative proposal in the Ukrainian parliament's agenda, which is about reforming education. But this legislative proposal is not a solution to the rights taken from the Hungarian national community. It is not a solution. I clearly told my colleague that the Hungarian expectation is clear. They should give back the rights from 2015, which is summed up in 11 points, and it should be fulfilled. As long as this does not happen, there can be no talk of opening an open chapter. I also told my colleague that I have been discussing this issue with the fourth Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine since 2011. So now the floor is full of promises and hopes. So now we need to make progress. We need to change the law. We do not want to be lazy. We do not believe in anything. So we will continue to meet with our experts on education next week, and we will look again at the 11 points and see what the initiatives in the Ukrainian parliament do not address. We will see how we can move forward politically. I will say it again, I told my colleague as well, so I will say the same to him as I am saying it here, that I think it would be very easy for the Ukrainians to solve the issue of the return of the rights of the Hungarians in the Carpathian Basin simply by changing some of the laws of 2015. Well, this is where we stand. If you have any questions on any of the topics, I am happy to answer them. Boglarka, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My first question is about the meeting with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. What was the mood of the meeting? If I am not mistaken, it was the first meeting between the four of us since Hungary announced that it would start a referendum on the joining of the EU with Ukraine. Then I would like to ask about NATO's advice. In relation to Europe, what is NATO's opinion? Can NATO deny that Europe is armed? And what about the peacekeepers? It was said that France and the United Kingdom would send peacekeepers to the Russian-Ukrainian front in case of a ceasefire. Would there be enough soldiers? That was the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia Pancho.
I am Patricia Panso from Kyiv Radio Chronicle. I would like to know if there was any mention in this two-day meeting that if a ceasefire is agreed upon and the EU does not support it, what are the possible answers to this? Thank you. I am Andrea Nemeth from Her TV. Thank you. I would like to connect to Patricia's question. Today's press reported that the Ukrainian president made an unexpected statement and admitted that they cannot regain their territories with military force. He said that a complete ceasefire is possible in the Russian-Ukrainian war. And this could happen within weeks if the Western pressure is applied to Russia. How do you see this situation? My other question is about NATO. Politico wrote in the morning before the summit that all participants will do their best to smile in front of the cameras. But in the meantime, the broken lines will be felt under the surface. My question is the threat that NATO will be emptied in the middle and long term, or will it be relocated elsewhere, not to Europe? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. My question is about the meeting with the Ukrainian foreign minister. I think that in foreign policy, it is very important to maintain the possibility of a personal, normal relationship, because it is always a last resort. If the conflicts and tensions are very serious, there should be someone who can talk to each other. Do not close the communication channels, because it leads to total tragedy. So, as we both tried to be professional to today's meeting, we talked to each other in a correct, normal atmosphere. I think it would be expected from foreign ministers to be able to talk to each other about the differences and disputes. This is our job, this is why we get paid, so it would be good if we were not able to do this. I am not saying that everyone is able to do this, but in this case, fortunately, we were able to have a normal, correct, respectful conversation. We have a fourth Ukrainian foreign minister with whom I am negotiating, so I think this will continue in the future as well. At the same time, the situation is undoubtedly tense, and I asked my Ukrainian colleague to make sure that they do not act as if they were facing a new kind of invasion from Hungary when it comes to the localization of the rights of the Carpathian Hungarians. In 2015, they started to change the laws in the Ukrainian parliament, which banned the rights of the Hungarians to use their mother tongue. So, to put this in a new way, as if it were coming from the sky, is a bit too much. In recent years, I have had many conversations with my Ukrainian foreign minister colleagues when they acted as if they were facing a new kind of invasion, even though we have talked about this 5 or 6 times in person. I asked them to stop this, because it is not worth dealing with each other seriously. There are serious issues here for 10 years. I think this could be easily solved, but the ball is rolling in their court. So, we cannot help this. We need to change the laws of Hungary, not the laws of Hungary, but the laws of Ukraine. We can be accused of many things, but it is hard for us to say that we would hide our intentions or would not speak directly. I would tell them what I would say at a NATO meeting or in public, and it is much easier this way. Now, as far as the development of the European Union's defense capabilities, the rearmament and the relationship with NATO is concerned, there have been some points of tension here, without a doubt. For example, where it is possible to buy and where it is not possible to buy weapons and other equipment necessary for the development of the European Union's defense capabilities. So, of course, those countries that are not members of the EU, they are interested in their own military industry and their military companies. This is obvious. And they regularly say that the development of the European defense capabilities is practically within the framework of NATO defense capabilities, and they do not think it is possible for military companies operating in non-EU NATO member states to be artificially excluded from the delivery opportunities. So this is a serious point of tension. We have to see this. This should not be hidden. We will see. So, this is also a detail that we will have to discuss and pay attention to. I do not think we will make any decisions about this in the future, because we are not the only ones to do so. But this is a point that will be raised in the future, so we have to deal with it in some way. There is no mention of peacekeeping here. Thank God. Because, for example, it would be the end of the NATO dispute, or the settlement of peacekeepers at the end of the war. Because if somehow NATO and Russia only get the chance to get into conflict with each other, then that would be the Third World War, so thank God that there is no mention of peacekeeping within the framework of NATO, and I really hope that this will not happen, because, of course, the Russians do not tolerate NATO troops entering the territory of Ukraine for any purpose, and it is possible to argue about whether this is legal or not. But I suggest that we look at this issue from the point of view of the outcome, and I hope that no one wants a Third World War, regardless of whether it is legal or not. Now, as far as the possibility of ceasefire and its consequences are concerned, there was no mention of this because there was no ceasefire in the first place. It was very interesting to listen to some countries here who controlled Russia because they did not want a ceasefire, while these countries controlled us for 3 years because we wanted a ceasefire. So, for the time being, some of them do not fully understand their own intentions. As far as I can see, we did not get to the consequences of a ceasefire. Now, as far as the problems of the breakup and the breakup are concerned, I can tell you the following. Marco Rubio was here and not Tony Blinken anymore. I think the U.S. Secretary of State gave a very correct and realistic situation, and he gave a very correct statement in all of his statements. I think the world has become a safer place because Donald Trump became the President of the United States, and the world has become a safer place because American foreign policy has basically set fire to peace. It can also be seen that those who, if the Americans are not there, are very brave in dealing with the Americans. When the American foreign minister is here, they use a more restrained language. So the level of bravery is not there when the Americans are here, as it is not there when the Americans are not here. At the same time, it is undoubted that there are those who are frustrated by the new U.S. position. This is undoubted. We are very happy with the new U.S. position. We are very happy to support it, and we hope that the American peace efforts will lead to success. At the same time, the American foreign minister made it clear that NATO is important for the United States and for the current president and the administration. So I think that a correct cooperation will make NATO the world's strongest defense alliance in the future. It is very important that we respect their defense character, so that we do not change the original intention. Now, as far as the Zelensky statement is concerned, according to which I cannot regain the occupied territories with military force. I think that President Zelensky could ask his European friends why he had to obey for 3 years that Ukraine would win this war. For the Europeans and for the American Democratic Administration, Ukraine will win this war. This type of war has continuously extended this war and has continuously increased the risk of its escalation. For 3 years, the Europeans, along with the Democratic administration, have not been willing to evaluate the situation realistically. And with this completely unrealistic reality, Ukraine will win this war by approaching it, by adding to the lengthening of this war, and by increasing its destruction. This is the situation. Meanwhile, it is clear for 3 years that there is no military solution, and that Ukraine will not be able to win this war against a nuclear superpower. If this recognition had not been achieved in 3 years, but 2 weeks after the outbreak of the war, and if the Europeans had not made this completely false misconception, then it is possible to calculate how much less people would have died, and how much less destruction there would have been. And I think that with this responsibility, and with the question of responsibility, those who have taken this responsibility upon themselves will meet after a while. And it is clear that they are trying to postpone the end of this war in time, so that this meeting of responsibility will come sooner or later. Only this will take place again in new human lives, and this will increase the degree of responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for respecting your partners today. We would like to thank our viewers at home for their attention. We are now saying goodbye from Brussels, and we wish you a nice day.